Today in Legally Us, Caroline Manzo sues Bravo over an alleged incident with Brandi Glanville. Plus, Sofia Vergara is sued by a drug lord's family, and Taylor Swift contemplates legal action against AI images. We got that plus so much more on today's Legally Us. Hey everyone, and welcome to Legally Us. I'm Christina. That's Nima Rahmani, President and CEO of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Hi, Nima. How are you?
Doing great, Christina. How about you?
Doing good. So lots of big stories this week, starting with Caroline Manzo. She has filed a lawsuit against Bravo over an alleged incident involving her and Brandi Glanville during production on season 4 of The Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip. So Caroline claims Bravo would regularly push the show stars to drink alcohol to cause them to become severely intoxicated and then direct, encourage, or allow them to sexually harass other cast members because that is for good ratings. Now, it was reported in January of last year that Caroline and Brandi left filming in Morocco early after Brandi allegedly kissed Caroline multiple times without her consent. During the evening, Brandi allegedly spread Caroline's legs and leaned into her, after which Caroline moved away from her. Brandi proceeded to kiss Manzo with a closed mouth. This is all in the court documents. Brandi then kissed Caroline again. She was very uncomfortable. She apparently was held down and in the bathroom so she could kiss her again. So this kind of goes back and forth. Brandi is not listed as a defendant in the lawsuit and previously declared her innocence in a series of tweets. Her legal team said that sadly, Brandi had to wake up to yet another lawsuit that includes defamatory false accusations about her. So why would Caroline sue Bravo and not include Brandi in this?
Well, Christina, Bravo is the deep pocket. They're the ones that have the money. Really, it's NBC Universal, which owns Bravo. So, I don't expect there to be any significant settlement or judgment that Caroline can get out of Brandi. So she's going after the entity that can pay.
Yeah. But can Brandi now sue Caroline for defamation?
Well, generally speaking, the allegations in a lawsuit, they're protected by the litigation privilege. So you can't sue for what's in the actual paper filing itself, or now it's an electronic filing. But of course, if Caroline or her lawyers were to say something outside of the actual filing, then Brandi could potentially sue for defamation.
It was interesting in the court documents, Caroline stated that Bravo allowed Brandi to skip a sexual harassment course. Can that come back and bite Bravo?
Potentially, yes. So what we're talking about here is sexual assault, but sexual harassment laws are on the books in a lot of states like California. So for instance, I'm here in Los Angeles and I have to conduct annual or sometimes every other year sexual harassment training for my employees. So if an employer is not doing that, can be introduced as evidence that they don't really have a sexual harassment policy in place to prevent this kind of conduct. But Christina, you and I have seen a lot of these lawsuits against Bravo, and none of them have gone to trial. And the reason is, there's an arbitration provision in most of these agreements. I've reviewed them, and there's some pretty significant waivers. Now, obviously, no one's going to consent to sexual assault. I mean, that's not something you can agree to. But these plaintiffs that bring cases against Bravo, they really have an uphill legal battle here.
But can Caroline block Bravo from now ever airing this season of Ultimate Girls Trip, though?
Probably not. That's something that she consented to as well. So, the talent in these agreements, they really don't have any what we call creative control over what's aired. It can be edited, it can be modified. They don't have any cut privileges, whether it's producer cut or final cut. So that's why, oftentimes you see these, Bravo celebrities that are trying to unionize to get these types of rights. But in the typical agreement that they have no control over what's airs.
Heading over, Sofia Vergara is being taken to court by the family of infamous Colombian drug lord Griselda Blanco over her miniseries Griselda, in which she stars as the cocaine godmother. So Blanco's adult children are acting as a representative of her estate. They have filed a lawsuit against Sofia and Netflix, claiming the unauthorized use of their family's image and likeness. So according to the lawsuit obtained by Entertainment Tonight, Griselda's son, Michael, alleges that he has been providing interviews since 2009 to individuals interested in developing his life story and that of his mother into production. potentially a show and a book. He further alleges that Netflix expressed interest in the project, but did not want to utilize any details or consultations from his interviews. However, he now claims that the miniseries heavily relies on his anecdotes and materials without proper compensation. While the lawsuit does not explicitly prohibit the depiction of their mother, the children assert that their likeness and interview materials were utilized in the production. So he did attempt to block the release of this series. Obviously, that did not happen. But did Netflix take a risk in releasing it?
Well, they did. And, no judge is going to block it. Really, if there's a violation, it's going to be something that results in money damages. It's going to be a civil lawsuit and a judgment or potentially a settlement. So let's talk about the couple of issues that we're dealing with. And the first is a right of publicity. So this is an area of the law that's really state specific. There's generally no federal law of publicity. And I'll talk about California law because that's where I live and that's where Netflix is. So California does protect a right of publicity. But we really need to separate Griselda from her children. And the reason is this. One of the exceptions to the right of publicity is if it's newsworthy. If it's newsworthy, it's covered by a First Amendment. It's not protected. So, Griselda's story obviously was big news. She was one of the biggest drug traffickers of the 1980s, and this is not disputed. So the fact that there's a docuseries or documentary about it, or even a fictional piece of work, that's generally going to be protected. But the children may have a claim here because obviously they're not news. It seems like they weren't necessarily participating in what their mother was doing, or even if they were, it certainly wasn't to that extent. So I think they may actually have a claim. So that's the first issue in the case. The second is those meetings with Netflix. So, usually before the networks or the production companies take a meeting, they know that there might be a claim later on that someone stole my idea. So oftentimes, before the meeting even takes place, there's a waiver that's signed that's saying, listen, we're taking the meeting. We're not obligated to take on the project. If we do and we don't use you, we don't owe you anything. So really, the other claim is going to be contractual in nature. Really, did Netflix steal the story? So I'm interested to see if one of those waivers was signed.
Yeah, no. And I was interested because he filed the lawsuit before the show was released. So I wonder if he got screeners, in advance to even know how his likeness was even used.
Yeah. And sometimes what, people will try to do is stop something from happening, maybe get an injunction. But generally speaking, courts are pretty reluctant to impose what we call a prior restraint on speech. That means stop someone from speaking. So again, if something happens, if something is infringing on someone's rights, generally the remedy is, you got to pay up. So, courts are less likely to stop the project from happening. But if they do, and if there's a violation, then Netflix may have to pay some profits to Griselda's family members.
So why exactly are they suing Sofia and not just suing Netflix?
Yeah, so Sofia, the reason they're going after her is you can't defame the dead. So Sofia can't necessarily say something against Griselda or do something that would be actionable. But under California law, heirs have actually 50 years to protect the name and likeness of a decedent. So they're really using that unique California law to protect their mother's name and likeness and publicity rights.
Will Sofia have to pay them any damages, you think?
Potentially, yes. It really depends on whether it falls under that newsworthy, that First Amendment exception to those rights of publicity or not.
All right, moving on to Taylor Swift. So graphic AI images of Taylor went viral on the social media platform X, and users are being met with an error message upon searching her name. That has now been rectified, and people can search her name now. But the White House also spoke out after this scandal, calling for legislation to protect victims of online harassment. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said the incident was alarming and that the Biden administration is focusing on the negatives of AI. SAG-AFTRA also released a statement on the situation, writing the development and dissemination of fake images, especially those of lewd nature, without someone's consent must be made illegal. As a society, we have it in our power to control these technologies, but we must act now before it is too late. So, it's probably a question that a lot of tech companies are asking. How can these images be stopped, and can Taylor take any sort of legal action, and who would she target?
Christina, this is another area of the law where really technology has outpaced the law, and it's really state specific. Unfortunately, there is no federal law that prohibits these types of images. And, there's only a small handful of states that do prohibit it. Tennessee, where Taylor Swift lives, I don't believe has a law prohibiting these types of fake or AI generated pornographic images. But California, where I live, does. And you can sue if it's malicious and get up to $150,000 for each violation. So it really depends on the state, and hopefully other states follow suit. But there's really only a minority of them right now that are taking up this issue. But we know that Swifties have a lot of power, just like Britney Spears helped change some conservatorship laws. So hopefully Taylor Swift, even though this is something that is terrible, does, be an impetus for some legislative change, because it really needs to happen.
And speaking of Taylor, there's been an odd marketing trend from new music artists on social media. Some blog sites have seemingly promoted artists claiming they're related to celebrities like Tom Holland and Taylor Swift. So is this technically legal? And if not, what laws or rights are they breaking from the celebrities' standpoint in this?
Well, they're breaking a couple laws. If they're lying, it could be outright fraud if they're using it to sell music. And of course, if someone is using a celebrity's name without their consent, just like their image or likeness, the celebrity can sue as well. So talking about the consumer as well as the Taylor Swift or whomever's name is being used unlawfully, they both may have civil claims here.
All right. Well, thanks for clearing that up, Nima, as always. Look forward to what we have in store next week.
Thanks, Christina. See you next week.
All right. See you next week. For more news, content, and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below and visit usmagazine.com.